Charlie Brown Christmas by Vince Guaraldi is, without a doubt, the best Christmas album ever made, which is completely an opinion, but it's my favorite, so I thought I would talk a little bit about this album, what I think makes it so great. At least I know I'm not alone in my assertion that it is my favorite. I mean, it's one of the most widely played Christmas albums of all time, which is particularly fascinating because it's not nearly as in-your-face Christmas as many of the other Christmas albums out there. Now, of course, there are tracks like Christmas Time's Here that has literal lyrics that talk about Christmas, but I mean, other than that, some of the original compositions that were put on this album, they're kind of just pretty straight-ahead jazz compositions. I think there are a lot of reasons why this album in particular just seems to land well with so many people. There is, of course, one song from this album that everybody knows and everybody asks for. But the interesting thing about that song is that it was actually written not for the Christmas special at all. There was a documentary that Lee Mendelson, TV producer, was going to make back in 1964 about Charles Schulz's Peanuts series. Lee knew about Vince Guaraldi, and he contacted Vince and asked him to write music for the documentary.
He called me one day on the phone, and he says, "I've written this song, and you've got to listen to it," because he didn't write it down that well, and he was afraid he was going to forget it. And I said, "Oh, I don't want to hear it over the phone." He says, "Don't move." And he played Linus and Lucy for the first time. And it was just something went off in my head that this was going to be very meaningful to us in some way. I wasn't quite sure, which way. And that became our theme song.
It is still one of the most known jazz songs, compositions that we have today. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about because we typically don't put it in the same category where Take 5 or So What are some of the most iconic jazz compositions. Something like Linus and Lucy is arguably up there, if not even more famous, because of just sheerly how many people know it and how many times it's been played. I mean, it's kind of like a household melody, which is pretty amazing. That documentary series never ended up getting picked up by television stations. The networks didn't want it. They didn't think it was going to be successful. And so it was shelved, and it wasn't until the next year in 1965 that Coca-Cola commissioned the Charlie Brown Christmas special. One of the most beloved Christmas movies of all time was basically a marketing campaign. Anyways, the theme came back for the 1965 special, and that's when it first was released to the world. And the rest is history. As we know, the special became one of the most popular Christmas movies ever, and the music is some of the most popular Christmas music ever. Now, obviously there's an important component that comes into play with any type of Christmas music, especially from this era, from the 60s, and that is nostalgia. And I think that a lot of people share that same sort of sentiment where they just grew up consuming this album around Christmas time, and so it has just become, it just feels like Christmas. But if you think about it, there's so many aspects to this album where it's like there's no reason why it would feel like Christmas. I mean, in and of itself, this does not sound Christmassy. There's nothing inherently Christmassy about that chord progression or about the melody, yet it is one of the most iconic Christmas melodies of all time. And it's the same when we look at something like really a great piece of writing, but not inherently Christmassy. Or what about the improvisation over O Tannenbaum, or Christmas Tree as we know it? Again, not inherently Christmassy, and if you didn't know that we were playing that melody, there'd really be no reason to know that this is even a Christmas song. It's just good music that was designed from the get-go to be a sort of background to the narrative that was going on in the special itself. Now, what's really interesting about Vince Guaraldi is that Vince was never one of these players that in the jazz world we really look to as like one of the legends, one of the prime examples of people that you study. He's never really been in that category, which is interesting because of the overall impact that he's obviously had on the jazz world. But Vince himself did not really consider himself to be a great piano player. The way he sort of thought about his own playing is oftentimes the way I find myself sometimes thinking about my playing. Yeah, I'm confident in my ability to play, but I certainly recognize that there are monsters out there that I have put in way more time and effort than I have. And I think that's sort of the mentality that Vince had about his own playing, which is interesting because when you actually take apart what's going on in some of these songs and some of these compositions, you can kind of see what he's talking about. And that might seem like a negative thing to say, but it's not. It's not suggesting that like, oh yeah, he's not very good. No, not at all. Rather, you can hear this is a person who understands how to very effectively play within their own ability level. Vince didn't have the technique of an Oscar Peterson. He maybe didn't have the harmonic fluency of a Bill Evans, but he played beautiful lines to navigate his own compositions and whatever tune he was playing at the moment. And he was a really, really great writer.
There are two ways to write a song, either through the harmonic content or the melodic content. I prefer a strong melody. It's something that stays with. It's something that stays with you, and I can't think of an instance where anybody's walking down the street whistling the chord changes.
Check out My Little Drum, which of course is sort of a reimagining of Little Drummer Boy. That melody and harmony in the right hand is actually really brilliant. Here's an important takeaway, ready? If you want to outline a chord, if you actually want to like show what a chord is, you only need the third and the seventh. With only the third and the seventh, you can hear motion, right? If I fill up all of that harmony, so we're playing full chords for every single change, it's gonna pretty much sound the same, just with more notes. So check out if we took like a 2-5-1 exercise, moving down, say, in half steps. I don't know, let's try half steps. Whole steps. What if we just took the third and the seventh of each one of those chords and like that was all we played and we did that same exercise? You can still hear the motion, check it out. Right? Okay, and then if we add the roots back in. I mean, this is just one example of really great, simple writing. So I think one of the reasons that this album just did so well is because it's very easy to consume. It just sounds so nice and simple and easy to listen to, yet contains so much great information from a jazz perspective. Great harmonies, great compositional style, great improvising. I think the entire record from an improvisational context can be summed up with These are staples of Vince Guaraldi's improvisational style. Where does this album stack up for you? Are there a number of albums that are bigger favorites for you? Is this your favorite? What have you always liked about it? Have you learned from Vince Guaraldi? For me, this was like one of the books that I had first that taught me a little bit about improvisation and some of the structure of these lines, because when I was younger, I actually got the book that had the music in it, and I was able to go through and learn pretty much note for note. That was before I knew how to transcribe. Another point that we cover in the course, transcribing, which is the best way to learn anything. But I had a book in this case. I feel like so many pianists have gone through that book at one point or another. But let me know, have you played this before? Have you gone through the book yourself? Is this one of your favorite albums? I'm very curious to hear you guys' feedback in the comments below. For me, personally, this is probably my favorite Christmas album of all time. Sadly, Vince died in 1976 at the age of 47. I don't know how big of a thing the Christmas special had become in the 11 years since its release, but certainly he was never fortunate enough to be able to see the impact that he had on the world as a whole years and years, decades later. Because obviously, as we know now, it is one of the most popular Christmas movies, one of the most popular Christmas albums of all time. And it is sad that he never got to see that. But I'm at least glad that we have this music to look back on. And you know, Vince has a lot of other music as well, and I would encourage you to go and check out more of what he's done. He may not have been one of the ones that we look to as the legends that we learn from in the jazz world, but he is absolutely worth considering, and he should not be overlooked. He provided a great service to the world of jazz by bringing this to such a huge audience. So I think, you know, as musicians, we all certainly owe it to him for that. But anyways, I wanted to just talk about this because it is one of my favorites. I definitely geek out over this stuff. It's just, I love it. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it as well. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.